My fiance's phone rang during our vows with the most romantic ringtone I had ever heard. The church fell silent except for the soft creak of wooden pews as 200 guests leaned forward to hear our vows. Mark stood across from me in his charcoal gray tuxedo, the same one we'd spent 3 hours picking out at Men's Warehouse back in February. His hands trembled slightly as he held mine, and I remember thinking it was sweet, my big, confident fiancé getting nervous on our wedding day. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, he began, his voice carrying across St. Matthew's Cathedral. 3 years ago you walked into that coffee shop on 5th Street wearing that ridiculous oversized sweater with paint stains on it, and I knew. Mark, baby, I love you so much. You make my heart sing like nobody else ever could. I can't wait to feel your arms around me tonight, my darling, my everything, The sultry female voice poured from Mark's jacket pocket like honey mixed with poison. Every word dripped with an intimacy I recognized but had never heard directed at my fiancé. Not in my voice, anyway. The custom ringtone continued for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 seconds before Mark frantically patted his jacket, his face cycling through confusion, horror, and finally a sickly shade of green. I stood frozen, my grandmother's pearl-beaded dress suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The silence in the church was deafening. 200 faces stared at us with expressions ranging from shock to barely contained amusement. I caught sight of Mark's mother in the third row, her mouth hanging open, and my sister Emma in the front row, her eyes wide with a kind of second-hand embarrassment that makes you want to disappear into the floor. I'm so sorry, I thought I turned it off, Mark whispered, fumbling with his phone. His best man Jake leaned over and hissed something I couldn't hear, but Mark just shook his head frantically. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. Perhaps we could continue with the ceremony? But I couldn't move. That voice kept playing in my head. Breathy, intimate, familiar in a way that made my stomach churn. I'd heard it before. Recently. Where had I heard it? Sarah? Mark's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Baby, we can keep going. It was just a spam call or something. A spam call. With a custom ringtone that someone had clearly recorded specifically for him. A ringtone that sounded nothing like the default marimba tone that played when I called him. I glanced down at his phone, still clutched in his sweaty palm. The screen showed incoming call from work Jennifer, but the contact picture was just a generic silhouette. Jennifer. Jennifer from his accounting firm. The one who'd been texting him about late projects and weekend deadlines for the past 6 months. The same Jennifer who'd sent him a congratulations text about our engagement that had seemed oddly cold and formal when Mark showed it to me. Jennifer, whose voice I'd heard exactly once during a company happy hour in March, laughing too loudly at Mark's stupid joke about tax deductions. The pieces clicked together with the devastating clarity of a perfectly solved puzzle that you never wanted to complete. Mark was still talking, saying something about continuing with the vows, how sorry he was for the interruption, how this was supposed to be our perfect day. His words felt like background noise as I stared at the 200 guests watching this disaster unfold in real time. My perfect day. The day I'd planned for 18 months, spending $47,000 of my savings and my parents' retirement fund. The day this man was supposed to become my husband. The phone stopped ringing, but the damage was already done. I could feel the whispers starting to ripple through the pews behind me like wildfire. Mark's face had gone from green to bright red, and tiny beads of sweat were forming along his hairline despite the church's air conditioning. Sarah, please, he whispered, stepping closer. We can talk about this later. Let's just finish the ceremony. Later, like this was some minor hiccup we could iron out during our honeymoon in Cabo. Like I hadn't just heard another woman's voice purring endearments into a phone that was supposed to belong to my husband. That was Jennifer, I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the congregation. Mark's eyes darted to Pastor Williams, then to his groomsmen, anywhere but my face. I don't know what you're talking about. Jennifer from your office. The one who's been texting you about those mysterious weekend projects. My voice was getting stronger now, clearer. The one whose voice I just heard telling you she loves you. Sarah, you're being ridiculous. It was probably just. Show me your phone. The church had gone completely silent again. Even the organist seemed to be holding her breath. I could see my father halfway up the aisle, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. My mother sat beside him, clutching her pearl necklace like a rosary. What? Mark's laugh sounded forced, hollow. Honey, we're in the middle of our wedding ceremony. Can we please just show me your phone? Pastor Williams stepped forward. Perhaps the bride and groom would like a few minutes too. No. I held up my hand, still staring at Mark. We're not going anywhere until he shows me his phone. Mark's best man Jake leaned over again, whispering urgently in his ear. I caught fragments, just show her. And, nothing to hide. But Mark just shook his head, clutching his phone tighter. That's when I knew for certain. You can't, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You can't show me because there's more, isn't there? Messages. Photos. How long, Mark? How long have you been sleeping with her? Jesus Christ, Sarah, lower your voice, he hissed, glancing around at our guests. People are staring. People are staring? I let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. You're worried about people staring? Your mistress just called you in the middle of our wedding vows with the most romantic ringtone I've ever heard, and you're worried about what people think. My sister Emma had moved to the end of her pew, clearly ready to intervene if needed. Behind her, I could see my college roommate Melissa holding up her phone, and I realized with a sick feeling that she was recording this. In about 10 minutes, this disaster would be all over Instagram, Snapchat, and probably TikTok. Mark seemed to realize it too. His jaw clenched as he looked out at the sea of faces, many of whom were now openly holding up their phones. His conservative Methodist parents in the third row looked like they wanted to crawl under the pews. His boss from the accounting firm sat in the 5th row, shaking his head slowly. Fine, Mark said suddenly, his voice sharp with anger. You want to do this here? In front of everyone? You want to humiliate us both? Humiliate us? The words came out louder than I intended, echoing off the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. I'm not the one who's been cheating throughout our entire engagement. The words hung in the air like a confession, and I watched Mark's facade crumble completely. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought he might actually tell the truth. Instead, he did something worse. You're right, he said, his voice suddenly calm, almost cold. I have been seeing Jennifer. For 8 months. And honestly, Sarah, can you blame me? The collective gasp from our wedding guests was audible, but Mark wasn't finished. You've been so obsessed with this wedding, with making everything perfect, that you forgot about us. When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about flowers or centerpieces or whether the napkins should be ivory or cream? Jennifer listens to me. She cares about my day, my work, my dreams. She doesn't treat me like some accessory to her perfect Pinterest wedding. I felt like I'd been slapped. Behind Mark, his groomsmen looked mortified. Jake was actually backing away, putting physical distance between himself and the disaster unfolding at the altar. My maid of honor, Chloe, appeared at my elbow as if from nowhere, her hand finding mine. Are you seriously blaming me for your affair? My voice cracked on the last word. I've been planning our wedding, Mark. Our future together. While you've been what, playing house with some home-wrecking accountant? Don't call her that, Mark snapped, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something protective and fierce that he'd never shown when defending me. Jennifer's a good person. She didn't plan for this to happen any more than I did. Oh, she's a good person, I repeated, letting out another one of those awful laughs. Good people record romantic voicemails for engaged men? Good people sleep with someone who's about to get married? Mark's phone buzzed again. This time the ringtone was different, still custom, but a sultry jazz song I didn't recognize. His eyes darted to the screen and back to me, and I saw something that looked almost like longing. Answer it, I said. What? I said answer it. If she's such a good person, if this relationship is so important to you, then answer your girlfriend's call. Right here, right now, in front of God and 200 witnesses. Sarah, that's insane. Answer the phone, Mark. My voice echoed through the cathedral with such force that even I was surprised. In the third row, his mother had started crying silently, her mascara leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. My own parents looked like they were witnessing a car crash in slow motion. The phone stopped ringing, but immediately started again. Same sultry jazz song. Same desperate buzzing. She really needs to talk to you, I observed, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. Maybe it's important. Maybe it's about the baby. Mark went white. Completely, utterly white. Oh my God, Chloe whispered beside me. Sarah, you don't really think. There's no baby, Mark said quickly. Too quickly. Sarah, that's not. But his phone was ringing for the third time now, and I could see people in the congregation starting to murmur more loudly. Someone in the back, I think it was my cousin David, actually shouted, just answer the damn phone. Mark looked around wildly, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. The front doors of the church suddenly seemed very far away. His phone kept ringing, that sensual jazz melody now sounding more like a funeral dirge. The baby, Mark? I pressed, stepping closer to him. Is there something else you forgot to mention? Because I have to say, this day just keeps getting better and better. His silence was answer enough. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, and in that moment, I realized I was staring at a complete stranger. Not the man who'd held my hair back when I had food poisoning last Christmas. Not the one who'd driven 4 hours to help me move out of my old apartment. This was someone else entirely, someone who could look me in the eye and lie with the practiced ease of a seasoned con artist. There's no baby, Sarah, Mark repeated, but his voice wavered on the last syllable. His phone had finally stopped ringing, but now I could see text notifications lighting up the screen. One after another, like fireworks going off in his palm. Even from where I stood, I could make out fragments. Mark, please pick up. And we need to talk about. Then why do you look like you're about to throw up? I asked, my voice carrying across the cathedral with crystal clarity. In the silence that followed, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a baby crying somewhere in the back of the church. Mrs. Patterson's 6-month-old grandson, probably, but the timing was so perfect it felt like the universe was mocking me. Mark's best man Jake cleared his throat. Maybe we should take this somewhere private. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. I'm done with private conversations. I'm done with secrets and lies and weekend work projects. I turned to face our guests, my voice rising. Did you all know? Has everyone been laughing behind my back for months while I planned this joke of a wedding? A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My college friend Rachel looked genuinely shocked, but I noticed Mark's coworker Brad from the accounting firm couldn't meet my eyes. Neither could his office friend Tom, who I'd specifically invited because Mark insisted they were like family. Sarah, please, Mark reached for my arm, but I jerked away so violently that my bouquet, $300 worth of white roses and baby's breath, flew from my hands and scattered across the altar steps. Don't touch me. My voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. Don't you dare touch me with the same hands that have been touching her. Pastor Williams stepped forward, his face creased with genuine concern. Perhaps we could postpone the ceremony. There isn't going to be a ceremony, I said, never taking my eyes off Mark's face. Because my fiancé has been living a double life, and apparently everyone knew except the bride. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call, just a text message that lit up the screen long enough for me to see the sender, Jennifer Red Heart Kiss Mark, with a photo attachment that made Mark quickly flip the phone face down. But not quickly enough. Oh, that's rich, I said, letting out a laugh that bordered on hysterical. Heart emojis and kiss emojis? How old is she, Mark? 16? She's 25, he said automatically, then immediately looked like he wanted to take the words back. 25, I repeated slowly. 3 years younger than me. Let me guess, she thinks you're this mature, sophisticated older man who's trapped in a loveless engagement to some bridezilla who doesn't appreciate him? The accuracy of my guess was written all over his face. That's not how. That's exactly how it is. I could feel my carefully applied makeup starting to run as angry tears pricked at my eyes, but I didn't care anymore. You painted me as the villain in your little romance novel, didn't you? Poor Mark, stuck with demanding Sarah who cares more about wedding planning than his feelings. Behind me, I heard my father's voice, low and dangerous. Son, I think you better start explaining yourself. Mark turned toward my dad with something that looked almost like relief, until he saw my father's expression. Dad had played football in college, still worked construction at 55, and right now looked like he could bench press Mark's entire wedding party. Mr. Morrison, I can explain. You can explain to me why my daughter spent her life savings on a wedding to a man who's been cheating on her. Dad's voice carried the kind of quiet fury that made smart people back down immediately. Mark wasn't that smart. It's not that simple, he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. Sarah and I have had problems for months. We've grown apart. Jennifer and I connected on a deeper level. A deeper level? I interrupted, my voice rising to just below a shout. Is that what we're calling it? What's deeper, Mark, her personality or her bra size? The collective intake of breath from our wedding guests was audible, but I was past caring about propriety. $47,000, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. That's how much this wedding cost. $47,000 for a man who's been screwing his coworker for 8 months. Mark's mother let out a small sob from the third row. His phone buzzed again. This time, Mark didn't even try to hide the screen. Maybe he was too rattled, or maybe some part of him wanted me to see it. The message was from Jennifer Red Heart Kissmark, and it was long enough that I could read the first line even from 3 feet away. The doctor confirmed it. I'm 8 weeks along. The church might as well have been struck by lightning. Mark's face went from pale to gray to a color I didn't know human skin could achieve. His phone slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered onto the marble altar steps, the screen still glowing with Jennifer's message for everyone in the front rows to see. 8 weeks, I said, my voice unnaturally calm. 8 weeks pregnant. I turned to face our guests again, feeling strangely detached from my own body. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my fiancé, Mark Davidson, who's not only been having an affair throughout our engagement, but is apparently about to become a father with his 25-year-old coworker. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the air conditioning humming in the ceiling rafters. Then, like a dam bursting, the whispers started. 200 people suddenly had a lot to say, and none of it was good for Mark. His best man Jake had gone completely white and was backing away from the altar like Mark had developed a contagious disease. The groomsmen, Mark's college buddies who'd spent last night at his bachelor party, were staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Wait, called out a voice from the congregation. It was my cousin David, who'd never had much of a filter. If she's 8 weeks pregnant, that means. I could practically see him counting on his fingers. Didn't you guys go to that company retreat in Denver 8 weeks ago? The one Sarah couldn't go to because she had food poisoning? Mark's silence was deafening. I remembered that weekend. March 15th through 17th. I'd been violently sick with what we thought was a stomach bug, throwing up every 20 minutes and barely able to keep water down. Mark had been so sweet about it, bringing me soup and ginger ale before he left, calling to check on me every few hours from Colorado. He'd even FaceTimed me from his hotel room Sunday night to show me the mountain view, telling me how much he wished I was there with him. You son of a bitch, I breathed, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. That weekend I was sick. That's when you slept with her, isn't it? Well, I was home alone, puking my guts out and feeling guilty that I couldn't go support you at your stupid work retreat. Sarah, it wasn't planned. It wasn't planned? My voice cracked like a whip across the cathedral. What wasn't planned, Mark? The sex or the baby? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you planned plenty. His phone buzzed again on the marble steps. This time the screen showed an incoming call from Mom. Apparently Jennifer was calling her baby daddy's mother-in-law-to-be directly. Mark lunged for the phone, but my sister Emma was faster. She'd somehow made it up to the altar without me noticing and grabbed the device before Mark could reach it. Emma, don't, Mark started, but my sister was already swiping to answer. Hello, Jennifer, Emma said sweetly, holding the phone up so her voice would carry through the church's sound system. This is Emma, Sarah's sister. I'm calling from Sarah and Mark's wedding, where we just found out some very interesting news about you and the groom. The voice that came through the speaker was shaky and tearful. Is Mark there? I really need to talk to him. The doctor said everything looks good, but I'm scared and I don't know what to do about telling people and... Oh, honey, Emma interrupted, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I think that ship has sailed. You're currently on speakerphone in front of about 200 wedding guests who just learned that you're pregnant with the groom's baby. The line went silent. Then, oh my god. Oh my god, the wedding is today. Mark, are you there? I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen like this. Too late for that, Emma said cheerfully, then held the phone out toward Mark. She wants to talk to you, brother-in-law. Or should I say, baby daddy? Mark stared at the phone in Emma's outstretched hand like it was a live grenade. The entire cathedral held its collective breath, waiting to see if he'd actually take it. Jennifer's voice kept streaming through the speaker, getting more panicked by the second. Mark? Mark, please say something. I know this is terrible timing, but Dr. Peterson said I needed to reduce my stress levels and I've been so worried about how to tell you. Tell him what exactly? I called out, loud enough for the phone to pick up my voice. That you've been sleeping with an engaged man? That you're having his baby? Or that you've been calling him during his wedding ceremony like some kind of psychotic mistress? There was a sharp intake of breath from the phone, then Jennifer's voice, much smaller now. Who is that? That's the bride, Emma said helpfully. You know, the woman whose fiancé you've been screwing for the past 8 months. I heard Jennifer start to cry through the speaker, which somehow made me even angrier. She got to be the victim now? She got to sob and play innocent while I stood here in my $3,000 wedding dress, publicly humiliated in front of everyone I'd ever cared about? Oh, don't you dare cry, I snapped, moving closer to the phone. You recorded a romantic voicemail for my fiancé's ringtone. You sent him heart emojis and kiss emojis. You've been playing house with him for months while I planned a wedding. You don't get to cry now that you've been caught. Sarah, please, Mark finally found his voice. Jennifer didn't know we were getting married today. I told her it was postponed. The admission hit the cathedral like a thunderclap. Even Pastor Williams looked stunned. You what? My voice came out as barely a whisper, but in the perfect acoustics of St. Matthew's, everyone heard it. Mark's face crumpled as he realized what he'd just admitted. I mean, she knew we were engaged, but I told her we were having problems, that we were probably going to call it off. You told your pregnant mistress that our wedding was postponed? The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. When? When did you tell her that? Sarah, it's not what you think. Answer the question, Mark. My father's voice boomed from the congregation, and I saw him starting to rise from his seat. When did you tell that girl the wedding was off? Mark's silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10, 15. Behind him, his groomsmen were exchanging glances that ranged from mortified to disgusted. His college roommate Steve had actually removed his boutonniere and was holding it awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if he was still part of the wedding party. Tuesday, Mark finally whispered. Tuesday. 3 days ago. The same day I'd had my final dress fitting, confirmed the flower delivery, and called him excitedly to tell him that everything was perfect for our dream wedding. Tuesday, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. The same day I confirmed our honeymoon flights to Cabo. The same day I picked up your wedding ring from the jeweler. I turned to face our guests again. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 days ago my fiancé told his pregnant girlfriend that our wedding was cancelled. But somehow forgot to mention it to the bride. Jennifer's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Mark told me you guys broke up. He said you found out about us and ended things, and that he was going to move in with me after this weekend. He's been looking at apartments near my place. Shut up. Mark roared, lunging for the phone again, but Emma danced backward, keeping it out of his reach. No, please continue, I said, my voice deadly calm. This is fascinating. Tell me more about these apartments, Jennifer. And this moving in plan. Because apparently I'm the only person here who didn't know my engagement was over. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice was getting stronger, more confident now that she realized she'd been lied to as well. He looked at a 2-bedroom place on Maple Street yesterday. Said he needed space for when the baby comes. We've been talking about names. Baby names, I said, nodding slowly. Of course you have. What else have you two been planning? A nursery? A baby shower? Maybe a wedding of your own? Actually, Jennifer's voice was bitter now. He said he wasn't ready for marriage again after what you put him through. Said you were controlling and obsessive about the wedding planning, that it showed him what married life would really be like. The collective gasp from our wedding guests was audible, but I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears. Mark had not only cheated on me, gotten another woman pregnant, and lied to both of us, he'd also spent months trash-talking me to his mistress, painting me as some kind of bridezilla monster to justify his affair. What I put him through, I repeated slowly, looking directly at Mark's terrified face. Planning our wedding put him through something? Making sure our special day was perfect was controlling and obsessive? Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around us, I could see people holding up phones, recording every word. My cousin David was definitely live-streaming this on Instagram. By tonight, this disaster would be viral. Perfect. You know what, Mark? I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Jennifer's right. You're not ready for marriage. You're not ready for any of this. I gestured around the cathedral, at the flowers, the candles, the beautiful space I'd spent months planning. So let me make this really simple for everyone. I walked over to Pastor Williams and took the microphone from his surprised hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, my voice echoing through the cathedral's sound system, I'd like to formally announce that there will be no wedding today. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment the cathedral was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then the chaos erupted. Mark's mother let out a wail that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. His father stood up so abruptly that his program fell to the floor, the sound of paper hitting marble somehow audible over the growing murmur of 200 shocked guests. My own mother had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with what I hoped were tears of rage rather than disappointment. Sarah, wait, Mark said, reaching for the microphone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of his grasp. Oh, I'm not done, I announced, and the crowd fell silent again. Since we're all here, and since many of you took time off work, bought new outfits, and traveled from out of state to witness what you thought was going to be the happiest day of my life, I think you deserve the full story. Emma was still holding Mark's phone, and Jennifer's voice was a tinny whisper through the speaker. Mark? Mark, what's happening? Are you there? Jennifer, honey, I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up, I'm going to do you a huge favor right now. You listening? Yes, came the small voice. The man you're having a baby with? The one who's been telling you I'm a controlling bridezilla? He was supposed to marry me in about 15 minutes. He picked out wedding rings with me 3 weeks ago. We signed a lease on a house together last month, a 3-bedroom place on Oak Avenue with a nursery that I was planning to paint yellow because we wanted to wait to know the gender. I heard Jennifer's sharp intake of breath through the phone. He told me he loved me yesterday morning, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Yesterday. He helped me carry my wedding dress upstairs and told me he couldn't wait to call me Mrs. Davidson. Then apparently he went apartment hunting with you. Mark had gone completely gray now, swaying slightly like he might actually faint. His best man Jake was looking around desperately, probably calculating how quickly he could escape through the side door. But here's the really fun part, Jennifer, I said, warming to my theme. Since he told you our wedding was cancelled on Tuesday, and he told you he was planning to move in with you, did he happen to mention that he also confirmed our honeymoon reservations on Wednesday? 2 tickets to Cabo San Lucas, leaving tomorrow morning. Room 412 at the Grand Solmar Resort. Champagne package included. The silence from the phone was deafening. He what? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. 5 days in paradise, I continued cheerfully. Couples massage at the spa. Sunset dinner cruise. Snorkeling excursion. All paid for with our joint credit card, you know, the one he opened with his fiancée to pay for wedding expenses. Through the phone, I could hear Jennifer starting to hyperventilate. In the front row, Mark's college friend Steve had actually started backing toward the exit, apparently deciding he wanted no part of whatever was about to happen next. Sarah, stop, Mark pleaded, his voice cracking. You're destroying everything. I'm destroying everything? I laughed into the microphone, the sound sharp and bitter. Mark, you destroyed everything 8 weeks ago in a Denver hotel room. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the wreckage up close. His phone buzzed in Emma's hand, not a call this time, but what looked like a text message. Emma glanced at the screen and her eyebrows shot up. Oh, this is interesting, she said, holding the phone higher. Jennifer just sent a photo. Mark, did you want to explain to everyone what this ultrasound picture says at the bottom? Mark lunged for the phone again, but my father had apparently had enough of watching from the sidelines. All 220 pounds of him moved up the aisle faster than I'd seen him move since his football days. Son, Dad said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made grown men reconsider their life choices. I think you better sit down and shut up before you make this any worse for yourself. Mark looked at my father's face and wisely decided not to argue. Emma, I said into the microphone, why don't you read that ultrasound report out loud? I think our guests would be interested to hear the details. Emma cleared her throat theatrically. Well, it says here patient, Jennifer Marie Walsh, DOB March 15, 1999. So she just turned 25 3 months ago. Gestational age, 8 weeks, 2 days. Estimated due date, December 18, 2024. And there's a little note at the bottom that says patient reports father is Mark Davidson, DOB listed as August 10, 1996. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Emma read that birth date again. August 10, 1996. The microphone nearly slipped from my hands. Mark, I said slowly, your birthday is August 10, 1995. You're 29, not 28. Mark's face went white as fresh snow. Around us, I could hear the whispers starting again, but they sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. You lied to her about your age, I continued, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. A 25-year-old woman is pregnant with your baby, and she thinks you're only 2 years older than her instead of 4. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice was sharp now. Mark, you told me you were 28. You said you were born in 1996. It's not a big deal, Mark stammered, but his voice cracked on the last word. What's a year? 2 years? What else did you lie to her about? I asked, stepping closer to him. Besides your age, our relationship status, and your moving in timeline? His silence was answer enough, but Jennifer's voice cut through the cathedral like a knife. Mark, are you married? Please tell me you're not already married to someone else. No. Mark shouted, loud enough that his voice echoed without the microphone. Sarah and I aren't married. We're not even together anymore. We were together yesterday morning, I said into the microphone, my voice deadly calm. We made coffee together. You kissed me goodbye before you left for your bachelor party. You told me you loved me and couldn't wait to marry me. The bachelor party, Jennifer's voice was getting stronger, more demanding. Mark, you said you were going to your cousin's birthday party last night. You said you'd call me when you got home, but you never did. I turned to look at Mark's groomsmen, who were all staring at their shoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Jake, I called out, want to tell Jennifer what you guys did at Mark's bachelor party last night? The one at Flanagan's pub that ended at 2 a.m.? Jake looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else on earth, but with 200 people staring at him, he had no choice. We went bar hopping. For his bachelor party. Because he was getting married today. The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a sob and a scream. You're all liars, Jennifer's voice shook with rage now. Every single one of you knew he was supposed to get married today and nobody thought to tell me? I'd been throwing up every morning for 3 weeks thinking about how we were going to raise this baby together. Mark's college roommate Steve, who'd been trying to edge toward the exit, suddenly stopped in his tracks. Wait, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jennifer, did Mark tell you he was the father? The question hung in the air like a live wire. What kind of question is that? Jennifer snapped through the speaker. Of course he's the father. We've been together for 8 months. Steve looked directly at Mark, his face grim. Dude, didn't you tell us last night that you've been getting tested for fertility issues? Something about how you and Sarah had been trying for 6 months with no luck. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Steve, shut up, Mark hissed, but it was too late. The cathedral had gone completely silent except for the sound of Jennifer crying through the phone speaker. 6 months? Jennifer's voice cut through the silence like glass. Mark, you told me you and Sarah never had sex. You said your relationship was completely dead, that you hadn't been intimate in over a year. The words hit me like a physical blow. I tasted bile in the back of my throat as I processed what she'd said. Not only had Mark been lying to me about the affair, he'd been lying to Jennifer about our relationship, painting me as some sexless, controlling shrew while apparently trying to get pregnant with me at the same time. That's not true, I said into the microphone, my voice stronger than I felt. We were intimate 3 days ago. Sunday night, after we got back from the rehearsal dinner. Mark looked like he wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him whole. Oh my god, Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper now. Oh my god, Mark, have you been sleeping with both of us this whole time? Steve cleared his throat awkwardly. Jennifer, I don't know if this helps, but Mark showed us some text messages last night. Screenshots of conversations with his doctor about low sperm count and motility issues. He was pretty drunk and going on about how it might not even be possible for him to get anyone pregnant naturally. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Jennifer's voice, stronger now, cutting through the speaker with deadly precision. Mark Davidson, if you have fertility issues, then whose baby am I carrying? Mark's face went from gray to green. His best man Jake had actually removed his boutonniere and was holding it like he wasn't sure if he was still part of the wedding party. Behind them, I could see Mark's parents whispering frantically to each other, his mother's face buried in her hands. Answer her, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the cathedral with crystal clarity. If you've been having fertility problems with your fiancé, how exactly did you manage to get your 25-year-old girlfriend pregnant? Sarah, this isn't the time or place. This is exactly the time and place, I cut him off. Jennifer, honey, how many other men were you sleeping with in March? None. Jennifer's voice cracked. I wasn't seeing anyone else. I thought Mark and I were exclusive after February. He told me he was going to leave you, that he just needed to figure out the timing. The timing, I repeated slowly. February. That's when you became exclusive with my fiancé. I turned to face our wedding guests, many of whom were still recording this disaster on their phones. February 15th was our 3-year anniversary. Mark took me to Chez Laurent and told me he couldn't wait to start a family with me. Through the phone, I heard Jennifer make a sound like a wounded animal. Jennifer, came a new voice from the congregation. It was my cousin David, who'd apparently had enough of being a silent observer. You said you work with Mark, right? At Henderson and Associates? Yes, Jennifer's voice was small and confused. So you know Tom Bradley? He's sitting right here in the fifth row. I followed David's gaze to see Tom, Mark's office friend, looking like he desperately wanted to disappear. His face had gone bright red, and he was staring fixedly at his hands. Tom? Jennifer's voice sharpened. Tom, are you there? You knew about the wedding, didn't you? Tom looked around desperately, but 200 pairs of eyes were focused on him now. There was no escape. Jennifer, he said finally, his voice barely audible, I tried to tell you Mark wasn't available. Remember that conversation we had in the break room in January? I told you he was engaged. You said he was engaged to someone he didn't love. Jennifer shot back. You said it was basically an arranged marriage, that he was trapped. Mark made a sound like he was choking. Tom, I called out sweetly, want to explain to everyone what you actually told Jennifer about my relationship with Mark. Tom stood up slowly, looking like a man walking to his execution. I might have given her the wrong impression about things. What kind of wrong impression? The hesitation stretched long enough that I knew whatever Tom was about to say was going to destroy what was left of my world. I told her Mark was only marrying you because you were pregnant, Tom said in a rush. And that he was looking for a way out. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. The microphone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the marble steps, the feedback screech echoing through the cathedral like a banshee's wail. Pregnant? Jennifer's voice cut through the chaos, no longer needing the speakerphone to be heard in the deadly silence. Tom, what are you talking about? Sarah's pregnant? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The cathedral walls seemed to be closing in around me, and I could feel 200 pairs of eyes boring into me like laser beams. My hands instinctively moved to my stomach, still flat under the pearl-beaded bodice of my grandmother's wedding dress. She's not pregnant, Mark said quickly, too quickly. Tom, what the hell are you talking about? But Tom was looking at me now with something that might have been sympathy, or maybe just morbid fascination. Mark told me back in February that Sarah was late. That they were waiting to confirm before they announced it, but that's why they moved the wedding up from October to June. The lie was so elaborate, so detailed, that for a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. We hadn't moved the wedding up. We'd set the date for June 15th back in November, before I'd even met Jennifer Walsh or heard her breathy voice declaring her love for my fiancé. That's not true, I managed to whisper, but my voice was so quiet I wasn't sure anyone heard me. Emma appeared at my side again, her face pale but determined. Sarah's not pregnant, she announced to the congregation, her voice carrying clearly without the microphone. She had her period last week. I know because she complained about having to deal with cramps during her bachelorette party. Through the phone speaker, Jennifer let out what sounded like a laugh mixed with a sob. So let me get this straight. Mark told his coworkers that Sarah was pregnant to explain why he was marrying her, but he told me that Sarah was controlling and sexless and they never slept together. Meanwhile, he's been trying to get Sarah actually pregnant while getting me pregnant and lying about his age and planning to move in with me after canceling a wedding I didn't know was happening. The summary was so absurd, so completely insane, that several people in the congregation actually started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind of bitter, shocked laughter that escapes when reality becomes too surreal to process normally. Mark's best man Jake had apparently decided he'd heard enough. Mark, what the actual hell, man, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. We've been friends since college. How did you think any of this was going to work out? I was going to figure it out, Mark stammered. I just needed more time to. To what? I found my voice again, stronger now, fueled by a rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. To get your story straight? To decide which one of us you actually wanted to be with? To figure out whose baby Jennifer is actually carrying? Mark's mother let out another sob from the third row, and I saw his father lean over to whisper something in her ear. Whatever he said made her crying intensify, her shoulders shaking with the force of it. Mrs. Davidson, I called out, my voice carrying across the cathedral. Did you know about Jennifer? Mark's mother looked up at me with mascara-streaked cheeks and shook her head frantically. Did you know your son has been telling his coworkers that I was pregnant? Another head shake, more violent this time. Did you know he's been apartment hunting and planning a life with another woman while I spent $47,000 on this wedding? This time she didn't shake her head. She just stared at me with an expression of such profound disappointment that I almost felt sorry for her. Mom? Mark's voice cracked on the word. What did Dad tell you? Mr. Davidson stood up slowly, his face grim. Son, we need to have a conversation. A long one. But not here, and not now. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice cut through the family drama. Mark, I need you to answer one question, and I need you to tell me the truth for once in your miserable life. Mark picked up his phone with shaking hands. Jennifer, if you have fertility problems, whose baby am I carrying? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Mark stared at the phone screen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Answer her, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Because I think we're all very curious about that ourselves. The silence stretched so long that I began to wonder if Mark had actually lost the ability to speak. His mouth moved soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air, while Jennifer's question echoed in all of our minds. Whose baby am I carrying? Mark, Jennifer's voice crackled through the phone speaker, harder now, more demanding. I asked you a question. The fertility issues aren't that severe, he stammered finally. The doctor said it might take longer, but it's not impossible. Bullshit. The word came from an unexpected source, Mark's own father. Mr. Davidson had stood up in the third row, his face thunderous. Son, you told your mother and me 6 months ago that the doctors said you had less than a 5% chance of natural conception. You asked us not to mention it to Sarah because you didn't want to worry her before the wedding. My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed onto Pastor Williams' podium to steady myself as the implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. 6 months ago was December. Right around the time Mark had started insisting we should stop trying so hard to get pregnant and just let it happen naturally. 5%? Jennifer's voice was getting stronger, more confident. Mark, you told me last month that your doctor said you were completely sterile. You said that's why we didn't need to use protection after March, because there was no way you could get me pregnant. The collective gasp from our wedding guests was audible, but I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears. Mark had been lying to both of us about his fertility, but in opposite directions. He told me we should keep trying while telling Jennifer they didn't need protection because it was impossible. Jennifer, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the cathedral without the microphone, when exactly did you start sleeping with other people again? I didn't, she protested immediately. I told you, I thought Mark and I were exclusive after February. I haven't been with anyone else since. She stopped abruptly, and I heard her sharp intake of breath through the speaker. Since when, Jennifer? Since the office Christmas party in December. But it was just one night, and it didn't mean anything. Mark's college friend Steve, who'd been trying to stay invisible near the altar, suddenly straightened up. Wait. Jennifer, the Christmas party at Henderson and Associates? The one at the Marriott downtown? Yes, but I don't see why that matters. Mark wasn't at that party, Steve said slowly. He was with us that weekend. December 15th through 17th. We went skiing in Aspen, remember? It was Danny's bachelor party. I felt the blood drain from my face as I did the math. December 15th would put Jennifer at exactly 20 weeks pregnant now, not 8. But the ultrasound Emma had read clearly said 8 weeks, which would mean. Jennifer, I called out, my voice surprisingly steady, have you had more than one ultrasound? There was a long pause. Yes. The first one was in February, when I was about 6 weeks along. But then I lost that baby. Miscarried in early March. The cathedral went completely silent except for the sound of the air conditioning humming overhead. And this pregnancy? I pressed. Started right after the miscarriage. My doctor said it happens sometimes, that the hormones can make you more fertile right after a loss. This baby was conceived in mid-March, in Denver. Denver. The work retreat where I'd been homesick, throwing up every 20 minutes while Mark was supposedly missing me from his hotel room. But now I understood why Jennifer's voice had sounded familiar during that romantic ringtone. I'd heard it before, not in person at a company party, but through Mark's phone. She'd been the one calling him during our couples therapy session in April. The call he'd declined and claimed was a spam caller. Mark, I said, turning to face him with perfect clarity, you got Jennifer pregnant twice. His face told me everything I needed to know. Twice? Jennifer's voice cut through the phone speaker like broken glass. What do you mean twice? I stared at Mark's ashen face, watching him crumble under the weight of his own lies. The Christmas party baby that you miscarried in March? That was Mark's too, wasn't it? Even though he told you he was sterile. No, Mark whispered, shaking his head frantically. Sarah, that's not, the timeline doesn't work. Actually, it works perfectly, interrupted Tom from the 5th row, apparently deciding he was already in too deep to stop now. Mark, you disappeared from the ski lodge that Saturday night in December. Said you had food poisoning and were going to sleep it off, but your room was empty when Danny went to check on you Sunday morning. Steve nodded grimly. We thought you'd driven home sick. You didn't answer your phone all weekend after that. Through the speaker, Jennifer's breathing was getting rapid and shallow. Mark, you told me you flew in from Denver for the Christmas party. You said you had a conference there and decided to surprise me. There was no conference, I said, pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. Mark, you lied to your friends about being sick so you could drive back to the city and sleep with Jennifer. Then you lied to Jennifer about where you'd been. Mark's mother had started crying again, but this time it sounded less like sadness and more like rage. His father was staring at him with an expression of pure disgust that made my own anger look tame by comparison. 2 babies, I continued, my voice getting stronger. You got her pregnant in December, then again in March. Both times while lying about your fertility status. Both times while engaged to me. The December baby wasn't planned. Mark burst out, then immediately looked like he wanted to take the words back. But the March baby was? The question came from Emma, who was still holding his phone like it might explode. Mark's silence stretched long enough that Jennifer's voice cut through it like a knife. Mark, answer her. Did you get me pregnant on purpose in Denver? I thought we were being careful. You told me you were sterile. Jennifer screamed through the speaker, loud enough that several people in the back rows jumped. You said there was no possible way I could get pregnant from you. Pastor William stepped forward, his face creased with concern. Perhaps we should. No, I cut him off, my voice sharp. We're finishing this conversation right here, right now, in front of God and everybody. I turned back to Mark. Did you lie to Jennifer about being sterile so you could get her pregnant? It's not that simple. It's a yes or no question, Mark. My voice echoed off the cathedral ceiling. Did you deliberately get your coworker pregnant while planning a wedding with me? His phone buzzed in Emma's hand. Another text from Jennifer, but this time Emma held it up so everyone could see the screen. It was a screenshot of a conversation between Jennifer and someone named Brad from accounting, dated 3 weeks ago. Emma cleared her throat and read aloud. Jennifer asks, are you sure Mark can't have kids? Brad responds, positive. He showed me the medical records last month. Doctor said his count is basically 0. Why? Jennifer responds, no reason. Just curious. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I looked at Brad, Mark's coworker who'd been avoiding eye contact all morning. Brad, I called out sweetly, want to tell us about these medical records? Brad looked like he wanted to crawl under his pew, but with 200 people staring at him, he had nowhere to hide. Mark showed me some lab results. Said his doctor told him he was basically infertile. When was this? I pressed. Last month. May something. Right after that team building retreat. Jennifer's voice crackled through the phone. Mark, if you showed Brad medical records saying you were infertile, then why did you tell your parents you had a 5% chance? And why did you tell Sarah you were just having minor issues? The web of lies was so complex I was getting dizzy trying to follow all the threads. Mark had told his parents one thing, me another, Jennifer a third version, and his coworkers something completely different. Because, came a new voice from the congregation, he's been playing all of us. Everyone turned to see my maid of honor Chloe standing up in the front row, her face pale but determined. Sarah, remember when Mark missed your birthday dinner in April? He said he had to work late on the Morrison account? I nodded, dread pooling in my stomach. I saw him that night. At Rosario's Italian, the restaurant on 5th Street. He was having dinner with a blonde woman, and they were definitely not discussing spreadsheets. Jennifer's voice came through the speaker, barely a whisper, April 23rd. That was our first official date. He took me to Rosario's and told me he'd finally broken up with his fiancée. My birthday. Mark had missed my 28th birthday dinner to take his pregnant mistress on their first official date, then came home with flowers and apologies about having to work late on a crisis project. The cathedral had gone so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, but in that silence, I finally understood the full scope of Mark's deception. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic, calculated manipulation of at least 4 different people with 4 different versions of the truth. And I was done being his victim. I picked up the microphone from where it had fallen, the feedback screech cutting through the cathedral one more time before settling into silence. When I spoke, my voice was steady, cold, and carried the weight of absolute finality. You know what the really pathetic part is, Mark? I actually felt guilty last week. Mark's eyes darted to mine, confusion flickering across his ashen face. Thursday night, when you were supposedly working late on the Patterson audit, I went through your phone. The admission sent a ripple of whispers through the congregation. I saw Jennifer's name in your recent calls, and I felt terrible about it. I thought I was being a paranoid, controlling fiancé, exactly like you'd been telling everyone I was. Through the phone speaker, Jennifer's breathing was audible, but she'd gone quiet, waiting. I found the charge for the ultrasound appointment on our joint credit card. March 28th, Denver Women's Health Center. $147. I turned to face our guests. I convinced myself it was a billing error. Maybe someone with a similar card number. Because surely my loving fiancé wouldn't be paying for another woman's prenatal care with our wedding fund. Mark's face had gone from gray to green. Sarah, you don't understand. Oh, but I do understand now. You used our joint account, the one with $47,000 of wedding money, to pay for your girlfriend's ultrasound. The same account you've been using to look at apartments with her. Emma was scrolling through Mark's phone, her expression growing darker by the second. Sarah, you need to see this. There's a whole conversation thread here about security deposits and lease applications. Read it, I said into the microphone. Emma's voice carried clearly across the cathedral. March 30th, Jennifer says the landlord approved our application. We can move in July 1st if you can transfer the deposit by Friday. Mark responds, already handled. Sent $3,000 from the joint account. Told Sarah it was for the honeymoon resort upgrade. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear someone's stomach growling in the back row. $3,000, I repeated slowly. You spent $3,000 of our wedding money on a security deposit for an apartment with your pregnant girlfriend, and you told me it was for upgrading our honeymoon suite. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice was small and broken. Mark, you told me that money came from your savings account. You said you'd been saving up to leave Sarah for months. I was saving, Mark stammered. I mean, technically it was saved money, it was just my money, I cut him off. The joint account that I funded with my inheritance from Grandma Morrison. The $15,000 she left me specifically for my wedding day. My grandmother's money. The woman who'd worn the same dress 60 years ago, who'd saved for months to buy the pearls that were sewn into the bodice, who'd made me promise to wear it when I married the love of my life. Mark's mother let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Even she understood the magnitude of what he'd done, using a dead woman's wedding gift to fund his affair. Emma, what else is in there? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Hotel reservations in Jennifer's name for this weekend. The Riverside Inn, honeymoon suite. Charged to your joint account yesterday for $463. The cathedral erupted in shocked murmurs. Mark had booked a romantic weekend getaway with his pregnant mistress, scheduled for the same dates as our wedding and honeymoon, using the money I'd inherited from my grandmother. While I was having my final dress fitting, I said, the pieces falling into place with crystal clarity, you were booking a hotel room to celebrate calling off our wedding with the woman carrying your baby. Jennifer's voice cracked through the speaker. Mark, is that true? Did you book us a room for this weekend? Mark's silence was answer enough, but I wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to our guests, I'd like you all to know that your travel expenses, your new outfits, your wedding gifts, and your time off work were wasted because my fiancé spent the last 3 months systematically stealing from our wedding fund to finance his double life. Through the phone, I heard Jennifer start to cry again, but this time it sounded different. Angry tears instead of heartbroken ones. $47,000, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. That's what this man stole from me while looking me in the eye every morning and telling me he loved me. And in that moment, standing in my grandmother's dress with a weight of 200 witnesses behind me, I realized I had the power to make sure Mark Davidson never lied to another woman again. I was done being destroyed by his lies. It was time to make sure he faced the consequences. Emma, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone, can you pull up Mark's banking app? He uses the same password for everything, our anniversary date. Sarah, no. Mark lunged forward, but my father stepped into the aisle, his construction worker frame blocking Mark's path completely. Son, I'd sit back down if I were you, Dad said quietly, but his voice carried the kind of authority that made smart people listen. Emma's fingers flew over Mark's phone screen. I'm in. Holy shit, Sarah, you need to see this. Language, Emma, my mother called out automatically, even in the middle of our family's public destruction. Sorry, Mom, but Sarah, there are transfers going back to January. $1,500 to something called Baby Essentials Registry in March. $800 to Rosario's restaurant gift cards in February. And look at this, $2,000 to Diamond District Jewelers last week. My blood turned to ice. Diamond District Jewelers? Through the phone speaker, Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Mark bought me a ring last week. A promise ring. Said it was his grandmother's engagement ring that he had reset. The sound that came out of me wasn't quite human. Mark's grandmother's ring, the one I'd admired in old family photos, the one he'd told me was lost years ago, was sitting on another woman's finger. That ring, I managed to choke out, belongs to the Davidson family. It's been passed down for 4 generations. Mark's mother shot to her feet like she'd been electrocuted. Mark William Davidson. Her voice echoed off the cathedral ceiling with the force of 29 years of suppressed maternal rage. You gave your great-grandmother's ring to your mistress? Even Mark seemed to realize he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Mom, I was going to explain. Explain what? Mrs. Davidson's voice cracked like a whip. How you stole a family heirloom to give to the woman you got pregnant while engaged to someone else. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice was getting stronger, more confident. Mrs. Davidson? This is Jennifer Walsh. I had no idea the ring belonged to your family. Mark told me he bought it specifically for me. Of course he did, Mrs. Davidson said bitterly. What else did he tell you, dear? That Sarah was emotionally abusive. That she'd isolated him from his family and friends. That you and Mr. Davidson couldn't stand her and were relieved he was finally leaving. The lie hit Mark's mother like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, her face cycling through shock, hurt, and finally, pure rage. Sarah Morrison, she called out, her voice carrying across the cathedral, you are the sweetest girl my son has ever brought home. You're the daughter I never had. What he's done to you is unforgivable. The validation should have felt good, but I was too numb to feel anything except cold, calculating anger. Emma, keep reading those transactions, I said into the microphone. March 15th, $500 to Adam and Eve Adult Boutique. March 20th, $300 to Victoria's Secret. April 2nd, $700 to Weekend Getaway Package, Napa Valley. Each transaction was another knife twist. Our joint account, funded by my grandmother's inheritance and my own savings, had been systematically drained to finance Mark's romance with Jennifer while I planned our wedding. How much? I asked quietly. Emma scrolled through months of statements, her face growing paler by the second. Sarah, it's over $23,000. Just since January. $23,000. Half of our wedding fund, stolen to pay for another relationship while I worried about whether we could afford upgraded centerpieces. Through the phone, Jennifer's voice was barely audible. Mark told me he was paying for everything with money from his successful investment portfolio. The laugh that escaped me sounded like breaking glass. You know what, Mark? I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the cathedral with crystalline clarity. I think it's time everyone got to hear exactly who they're dealing with. I gestured to Emma, who was still scrolling through his phone. Read Jennifer the text thread from last Tuesday. The one marked wedding planning urgent. Emma's eyes widened as she found it. Oh my God, Sarah. Read it out loud. Emma cleared her throat, her voice shaking slightly. Tuesday, June 11th, 2:47 p.m. Mark texted Jennifer, called the church this morning. Told Pastor Williams that Sarah had a family emergency and we need to postpone indefinitely. He was very understanding. Then at 3:15 p.m., canceled the photographer, florist, and catering. Only lost about $2,000 in deposits. Sarah doesn't know yet, she's been at work all day. The cathedral went dead silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. 3:45 p.m., Emma continued, Jennifer responds with heart emojis and I can't wait to start our real life together. And Mark replies, already transferred the honeymoon money to our new account. We can use it for the baby's nursery. Through the phone speaker, Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Mark, you told me you'd already broken up with her. You said she knew about us and agreed to call off the wedding. I turned to Pastor Williams, who looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Pastor, did my fiancé call you Tuesday to cancel today's ceremony? No, he said firmly. Absolutely not. I spoke with you yesterday morning to confirm the final details. Mark, I said, stepping closer to him, you tried to cancel our wedding behind my back while telling your pregnant girlfriend that I was on board with it. What was the plan exactly? Leave me standing here today wondering why the officiant never showed up? Mark's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, but Jennifer's voice cut through his silence like a blade. You bastard. You complete, lying bastard. You were going to let her find out at the altar that there was no wedding? It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Mark finally managed to croak. I was going to tell you both the truth after. After what? I demanded. After you humiliated me in front of 200 people? After you stole $50,000? After you moved in with your pregnant mistress using my grandmother's money? The weight of it all crashed over me at once, not just the betrayal, but the calculated cruelty of it. He'd been planning to destroy me in the most public, devastating way possible while playing victim to Jennifer about how controlling and difficult I was. But standing there in my grandmother's dress, surrounded by everyone I loved, I realized something important. I had a choice about how this story ended. You know what, Mark? I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Thank you. What? He looked confused, hopeful even. Thank you for being so spectacularly, catastrophically bad at this that your girlfriend called in the middle of our vows with that romantic ringtone. Because if she hadn't, I would have married you. I would have spent the next 10 years wondering why you seemed so distant, why money kept disappearing from our accounts, why you were never quite present in our life together. I turned to face our guests, many of whom were still recording this disaster for posterity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for witnessing the greatest gift Mark Davidson ever gave me, the truth about exactly who he really is, delivered at the perfect moment to save me from making the biggest mistake of my life. The applause started slowly, just my sister Emma clapping with fierce pride. Then my parents joined in, followed by my college friends, then Mark's own groomsmen who apparently had some sense of justice left. Within seconds, the entire cathedral was applauding while Mark stood frozen in his tuxedo, finally understanding that he hadn't destroyed me at all. He'd set me free.